Braille was invented by a 19th century man named Louis Braille, who was completely blind. Braille's story starts when a man named Louis, coincidentally enough with the surname Braille, was 3 years old. He was playing in his father's shop in Coupvray, France, and somehow managed to injure his eye. Though he was offered the best medical attention available at the time, it wasn't enough. An infection soon developed and spread to his other eye, rendering him blind in both of them. There was a system of reading in place for the blind at the time, which consisted of tracing a finger along raised letters. However, this system meant that reading was painfully slow, and it was difficult to discern by touch the relatively complex letters of the alphabet. As a result, many people struggled to master the embossed letter system. In 1821, Braille's teacher, Dr. Alexandre Francois-Rene invited a man named Charles Barbier to speak to a classroom of young blind students at the National Institute for Blind Youth in Paris. Barbier had developed a night writing system for the military using raised dots after Napoleon requested a system of communication that soldiers could use even in darkness without making any sound in the progress. Barbier's system was too complex for the military and was rejected. However, it was thought that it might be useful for the blind, which led Dr. Pignier to invite Barbier to come and demonstrate it. As it stood, the Barbier invention wasn't quite up to functioning as a system of touch-based reading and writing, being overly complex, using a 6x6 dot matrix. Further, this large dot matrix made it so that unless you had very large fingertips, you couldn't feel all of the dots in a single matrix without moving your finger. Still, Braille was inspired, and as a young teenager, he began experimenting. He took a piece of paper, a slate, and a stylus, punching holes and attempting to find something that worked. In 1825, Braille was just barely 16, but he thought he had hit upon something that was functional and superior to the existing embossed letter system. His original code consisted of 6 dots arranged in 2 parallel rows, each set of rows representing a letter. This configuration was simpler than Barbier's system, but still versatile enough to allow for up to 64 variations, enough for all of the letters of the alphabet as well as punctuation. It was also easily adapted to languages other than French. Most importantly, rather than needing to trace out a whole letter, it was much easier to feel the configuration of dots, making reading for the blind significantly faster and easier. Dr. Pignier was pleased with Braille's work and encouraged his students to use Braille's new system. Unfortunately, when Dr. Pignier introduced the history of France written in Braille for his students, he was dismissed from his position as headmaster due to his insistence on pushing Braille's system rather than the standard embossed letter system of the day. Nonetheless, Braille himself became a teacher at the institute and taught his code to the students who passed through, spreading the knowledge. In 1834, when Braille was in his mid-20s, he was invited to demonstrate the uses of Braille at the Exposition of Industry, which was being held in Paris that year, further spurring its popularity. By this time, Braille had also published a book about how to use the code. It was mostly written in embossed letters with Braille thrown in to demonstrate its use. Despite this, the National Institute for Blind Youth that Braille worked at still refused to adopt his system. It wouldn't be until 1854, 2 years after Braille died and 8 years after a school in Amsterdam started using it as their primary reading-writing system, that Braille's former school finally adopted Braille due to students overwhelmingly demanding the change. By the late 19th century, Braille had been adopted throughout most of the world, excepting the United States, who held out until 1916. And now for a bonus fact. These days, books for the blind in English are generally written in Grade 2 Braille. It is a system that combines letters and substitute letters for words. For instance, the letter Y is used to represent the word you, and the letter B represents the word but. In some respects, Grade 2 Braille is a lot like chat speak and takes shortcuts to make for an easier reading and writing experience. In addition to taking a shorter time to read, it also takes up less space, saving paper that's used to make Braille books. Grade 1 Braille, on the other hand, has every letter explicitly written out. There is also a Grade 3 Braille for any non-standard shorthands. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe. Brand new videos just like this every other week. If you want something else, we got a podcast. It's the same sort of thing we do here on the YouTube channel, just in an audio form, a bit more conversational and chatty. You can find a link to that below, or just search your favorite podcast app for BrainFood, one word. And as always, thank you for watching.